I assume Bill. There is Bill. Okay, hello everyone, and here we are again, our last session of the Leader's Handbook study sessions. It's been really fun. Um, so today we're going to talk about Chapter 9 of the Leader's Handbook. So um, Peter was really a good student of Dr. Deming's teaching, and he not only understood what Dr. Deming was talking about, he also expanded on that and brought in some of his own background and experience and and uh, and and really made them much richer and more accessible. Two areas that he's really done considerable work and effective work. One is in the teams and team building. That's because of his background in that area. And of course, he wrote the team handbook. Um, and then the other one is in the area of performance appraisal and the fallacy of performance appraisal. And because of his background, uh, 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 he really elaborated on that a lot. And I've read a lot of books on this topic, but Peter's work has really been the most comprehensive in terms of um, in terms of the fallacy of the performance appraisal and what to do instead, and what he calls debundling. What he has done when it comes to this topic is really brought the system of profound knowledge um, and all its aspects into together, and and in terms of understanding systems, understanding variation, psychology, and learning and theory of knowledge. He's put it all together, and you see the reflections of that today. I will share some slides with you, and Dennis Surgeon has done some work in that area, and he'll share some of his thoughts on that later in the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and share uh, my slides. And also, during the discussion, as I've mentioned before, I'm using the full screen, and if you like to jump in, just do that, and I won't see you. I don't see raise your hand and so forth. So the bulk of the material we're discussing is in Chapter 9 of the Leader's Handbook. Of course, as usual, this is my tribe. These are my people, and I've learned considerably from them all. Uh, the Let me get situated here. Okay. Um, Here is all this material comes from Peter and some of my own experience. This was a paper the students had to write in my MBA classes because they were mostly full-time employees, and they would do an analysis of performance appraisal in their workplace. And many of them were either the recipient of the performance appraisal or giving performance appraisals. And I think this is the most insightful papers the students wrote, and I learned a lot from them, and I've included a couple of those ideas in here. I used to teach a course in engineering management and graduate program in engineering management. In this particular program, many of the students were military officers, and it was very interesting to read take on the performance appraisal in military. So definition of performance appraisal. Performance appraisal is a process by which, these are various definitions, by which an organization establishes, measures, and evaluates an individual's behavior and accomplishments for a finite period of time. Performance appraisal is the process of evaluating or judging the way in which someone is functioning. Performance appraisal is a general heading for a variety of activities through which organizations seek to assess employees and develop their competence, enhance performance, and distribute rewards. I want to make a couple of points here. One is the most the strongest defense of performance appraisal come from people in HR. And if you have ever given a presentation with a number of the HR people in the audience, you know it. And the other point I like to make is I've really gotten a little bit more understanding because the performance appraisals in many organizations and is a part of their policies because that's how they came up in the system. If you know, if you don't, if the only tool you have is a hammer, a lot of things are going to look like nails. And they really don't, many of the managers, they don't know otherwise. They're faced with challenges. They don't understand it. And as I have experienced in my profession in higher education, it's a lot easier to grade the students than take time to help them develop. And that has been the same case. Is you don't want to deal with people's problems in the workplace, and you just do a performance appraisal and let it and done. So the purpose of performance appraisal, here are some of the areas that organizations, people, HR, management offers in terms of what they are trying to achieve. And one is the feedback to the employees about their performance, communications between the superior and subordinates, compensation, rewards, and salary purposes, identify candidates for promotion or layoffs, termination, for legal matters, leave a paper trail behind, and so those are some of the defenses for current practices in performance appraisal. Now, the conventional managements, they have four premises why they should perform performance appraisal. I've hardly heard anybody to articulate this is why they do it, except making people responsible. But this is really the undercurrent. This is the underlying assumptions why organizations and management practices performance appraisal. Premise one is the idea that problems begin from individual derelictions. You know, they're at fault, and that is the dereliction of duty that is causing the problems, and we have to have certain ways to appraise that. Premise two is a successful work requires holding people accountable for the achievements of measurable work. And accountability is just a common practice. We have to have accountable and have accountability. As somebody says, when you hear the word accountability, you're looking for somebody to blame. That's the idea. And premise three is there is a reservoir of withholding efforts that must be coaxed or coerced out of people. People are not doing their work. They're just withholding their best efforts, and we have to extract it out of them. And then the last one, premise four, is managers can and must motivate and control the workforce. And these are some of the premises implicitly or explicitly communicated by the management as why we have to have performance appraisal. So what is the assumptions behind these premises? And here is some, Peter likes to call them cynical assumptions. So cynical assumptions of the conventional management. So Douglas McGregor in the 1950s, an industrial psychologist, wrote a good book called um, the Human Side of Enterprise. And he proposed two theories, Theory X and Theory Y. We'll get to Theory Y in a moment. But in Theory X, he says that people believe, or management believes, that the workforce or people have an inherent dislike of work. They must be coerced, controlled, directed, or threatened. And I have really worked with people who believe these things. I have, in my own experience, worked with people who believe these things. As one production manager told me, it was a good employee is a hungry employee. It's just like Pavlovian dogs, and 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 there is the widespread belief in this, whether they say it openly or not. That's not the point. But a lot of people, management believes that. So they must be coerced, controlled, directed, or threatened. People have a preference, or employees have a preference for direction. So to avoid responsibility, they lack ambition and want security above all. And people are withholding their best efforts, and they can only be induced to better through punishment or incentive. And that's the origin of the carrots and stick approaches, external motivation. And McGregor says that this is theory X. People who believe in this believe in what he calls the theory X. Another assumption that they make is this what Peter calls Skinner in the workplace. Skinner was the human behavior modification psychologist that wrote a lot of books and big following. And that's the cynical view of the human behavior modification. So generally, the human behavior, they suggest that the human behavior is a set of responses that can be conditioned. Hence, we need extrinsic motivation. Kita, that's the kick in the you know what approach, carrots and sticks. This kita is Frederick Herzberg's term. Carrots and sticks, merit pay, incentive bonuses, and these are the external motivation instruments used in order to get people to modify their behavior. The assumption is that you have been withholding some reservoir of efforts waiting to be bribed or extracted from you. And yeah, I know we have someone here with a common way of doing that in many businesses is commissions, and I know we have people have looked at it differently. But my point is always is if you've hired somebody and you've gone through the hiring process and multiple interviews and selection process. And you believe this is the best employee, the best person for that job, what do you think they're withholding from you that you have to extract it through a commission or a bonus? Why is it necessary for you to do that in order to do a good job? If you've already gone through the entire hiring process and assuming that this is the best candidate for that position. The third one is this, what I call segmentalist view. That's when you divide the organization into parts and you assign people responsibility. That the individual is the critical unit as well as the ultimate actor in any work or any process. And the assumption there is the worker has complete control, and anything different the differences among people is because of their ability, not the conditions, not the system, not the environment, not their training, not their education, because this is all the same for everybody. So it is just the innate abilities that makes the difference in their performance, and we look at all of those shortly. So this is the kind of the assumptions that management makes, and if you've come out of that system, and some people are successful in moving up the ladder in corporate environment, and this is what they practice, and this is what they believe in. And some of the elements of the performance appraisal is that you set up a standard of measure, whether it's production or number of errors or whatever. You establish a standard, sales, revenue, number of calls you make, and number of patients you handle, and so forth. And that's the standard of measure. Then you have a period of performance. It's usually quarterly or annual or semi-annual. And the assessment methods are either ranking, you rank them, or you rate them, or a forced distribution. And this is what the forced distribution is. And then you just, percentage of people fall into different stages of the parts of the distribution. And then you have a performance interview. In all these years I have worked and I've observed, performance interview is usually once a year, and I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. And you're trying this, you see what the challenges are, that you're trying to address all of these goals of performance appraisal with this mechanical approach to it, and have it conducted in a short 15, 20 minutes interview by people who have the least training education to be doing those things. I have yet to see a manager, a supervisor, or somebody to have that much knowledge, that much experience to deal with the complex topic of human performance and understand all the elements of that. So those are some of the process by which you carry out the performance appraisal. And here is what Peter suggests, that there are three faults common to all variations of performance appraisal. One is that it doesn't work. There is no valid research to demonstrate that an organization is better off for having used performance evaluation. There is no research whatsoever. I don't know if I heard that from Dr. Deming in a seminar or it's in the Out of the Crisis. You beat up on a horse, they run faster for a little while. So there is no valid research that the performance appraisals as it being practiced is really has any long-term and effective results. The other problem is that it doesn't work, that the performance appraisal focuses mostly on individuals, sometimes on groups. There are group performance appraisals. Either one is. The premise here is that improvement occurs one employee or one group of employees at a time, not totally unrelated to the system. It's just you improve one employee at a time or one group at a time. And the lastly is the performance appraisal is a judgment. It's not a feedback. Feedback, we'll talk about it shortly, is really a system dynamics. Over here, that's what it says. Judgment is a hierarchical dynamic. Feedback is a system dynamic. And, the yelling, screaming, shaking your finger is not feedback. It's a judgment. You're a 5 is not or a 3 in ranking. That's not a feedback. It's a judgment. That has no impact. Feedback is a system term, and it has a specific definition. It's based on data. It's continuous, and it has to lead to an improvement. So these are the three faults common to all variations of performance appraisal. And based on my experience and some of yours, I have seen many different ways of the current practices being tweaked and 360 or this and that. It eventually is it it doesn't work. It's just tweaking a bad system is not gonna it's not gonna improve it. So, so what is the alternative to that? And this is some of the Peter's work has tapped into others and has included. First, this idea of motivation and what is motivation, extrinsic or intrinsic. The behavior modification people say is extrinsic. It has to come from outside. You need a stimulant in order to get people to do or to modify their behavior. So motivation is not something that gets done to people rather than something that people do. That's intrinsic. It comes from inside. And here, Douglas McGregor offers the theory why, and these are some of the elements of theory why, that the expenditure of physical and mental effort in work is as natural as play or rest. You remember Theory X says people don't want to work and you have to force them to assume responsibility and work. It says no. Expenditure of work, of physical and mental effort in work is as natural as play or rest. Um, and people will exercise self-direction and self-control in the service of objectives to which they are committed. Now, here is what we have. Dr. Deming talks about joy in work. Peter's consulting firm, their goal or motto was creating joy in work. When Dr. Deming talks about pride of workmanship, and these are all relating to this concept. The idea of that people don't resist change, they resist being changed, and they're committed to a change they're committed to a change that they are a part of the change process. They have something to say about it. Commitment to objective is a function of rewards associated with their achievement. Is how satisfying it is to do that job. The most significant of such rewards, the satisfaction of ego and self-actualization need, can be direct product of effort directed towards organizational objectives. And if you read McGregor and Peter, he says, okay, you have these people who have certain personal goals. Why don't you align those personal goals, those objectives, align those with the organizational objectives? Bring those in line with that. And so at the same time that the individual achieves their satisfaction of ego and self-actualization, and it's also consistent with the goals of the organization. The average human being learns under proper conditions not only to accept, but to seek responsibility. And as opposed to Theory X, people, they just don't, they avoid responsibility. They don't want to assume responsibility. They have to be directed. And McGregor and Scholtes and Herzberg are saying the average human being learns under proper conditions not only to accept, but to seek responsibility. So this is one challenge to the current thinking, is the idea of motivation and and um, and the people are really intrinsically motivated under right conditions. The other challenge to current practices is lack of understanding of systems and systems thinking. And in the current practices, the individual is totally we say that the individual is totally responsible for the outcome. Blame people. When you say what happened or who did it, you're asking actually who are we going to blame? Who's responsible for that, rather than why it happened? That's the system type question. Why? Why did that happen? So you're asking a systemic question. And Peter in Competency 5 talks about that. Understanding inner dependence. There are inner dependence and inner action activities in an organization. Yes, people are a part of the system, but they're not the entire system. That understanding the inner dependence and interaction between systems, variation, learning, and behavior and how all these affect each other. So a system view is this, what Deming offers as an organization, as a system. And yes, there are people in there, but they're not the entire system. So the outcome of this is just a simple Ishikawa diagram to show the output of any process, any system is dependent on a number of factors and their interaction. It's not just the individual. That we have materials, we have um, machines, we have methods, we have the environment and their interaction and interdependencies. So there are more factors in the system than just the individual. So that's what lack of understanding of systems and systems thinking is what drives some of the current practices in performance appraisal. Nowhere in uh, this point has been addressed than a simple equation, Dr. Deming. I think this is one of the most powerful point in the new economics. He makes about this idea that that if you consider X to be an individual and Y is the environment and YX therefore is the interaction of the individual with the environment produces a result. I expanded on that a little bit. So I said if X is the contributions from the individual, Y is the contributions from the environment, and YX is their interaction, it produces a result, whatever that result is. Produce $8 million in revenue, take care of 10 patients. This is common in hospitals, 10 patients per nurse, or carry out 35 procedures per day, or 20 calls per hour. So if this is X, this is the individual, this is Y, then X plus the contributions from Y and their interaction of the two produces that results. So what Deming says, this is not, anybody knows that's a one equation with two unknowns, and it's not, you can't solve that. So what I'm expanding on that, there is actually a solution to that. And that solution is to assume that all the contributions from the environment is zero. So that's setting Y to zero. Yes. So you're saying that the contributions from there is zero contributions from the environment, all other factors in the system. So if that is zero, it makes this one zero. So you say X equals to whatever the result is, which is totally not consistent with the world I live in. To say that there is zero contributions from all the elements and their interactions in the system. So that really makes the point that to try to assume that the person, the segmentalist view that the individual is totally responsible for the output of the process. The other point against the current practices is a lack of understanding of variation. That there is variation. There is variation in performance. There is variation in output. So I simply took out, let's say this is a performance appraisal. We were considering a number of defects per operator, and then you assign some bonus to that. So this is the list of operators and how many defects they produce for a period. And this is simply a simple control chart showing the performance of all the employees. Now, if you look at this, just the basic understanding, what we call this, that there is only routine variation. In other words, this is the underlying process that produced that type of variation and the performance, that they all belong to the same system. No one is, as far as the system is concerned, they're all the same. So it is futile to really award this person for the least number of defectives or punish these people for high number of defectives. But they both belong to the same system. This is what the system is, the capability of the system. So the idea that acting on this, acting on that, acting on that, acting on this, uh, uh, good performance, bad performance is really futile. That's what Dr. Deming calls tampering. And that what you are saying that each one of these performances are something of a special that you have to address, but they all belong to the same system. Rewarding this person is, as Dr. Deming says, reward for a good performance may be the same as reward to the weatherman for a pleasant day. I love this. They just report a pleasant day. They all belong to the same system of causes. So it's futile to try to award this person and punish that person. The management has a bigger problem on hand than to try to address this person or that person or that person. And that is during this period, the average defective was 11, but this is the range of variation you have in that system. You ought to be worrying about that, how to improve that system. And in this case, the improvement strategy is to move the average down and narrow the variation. So you have a bigger responsibility as management than just simply focus on this point, that point, this employee, that employee. And that responsibility is how to improve the system. So the next period came around, and this is a good graph to show the fallacy of the current practices. So I just showed you the graph for period 1. So period 2 came along, and I superimposed the graph on this. And you can see, so this is the orange is period 2 and blue is period 1. Now here is a person that you rewarded last period, but look where they are now. Here is the person that you punished last time. Now look where they are now. That only speaks to the nature of the variation in the process and in the system that you have to address. So, and it can change from period to period, and it's random variation, and you have a bigger responsibility as management is to improve the system rather than focusing on one individual at a time. Now, and this is the 2 periods side by side. Do you see anything earth-shattering or anything that you have to act on this employee or that employee or that employee or that employee? See, this is the same people. It just randomly varies from period to period. So I took an example from the master himself, and that is table 1 of Out of the Crisis, Dr. Deming's book on page 257. He has a chart, and I reproduce that here. Is the number of faults per 5,000 welds, is a list of welders. So here is a good example of a control chart showing the performance of 11 welders, operators. And here you see that welder number 6 is outside the system, right here. And welder number 6 is in need of help. Does it have harder materials to weld? Is it an eye vision problem? Is it some kind of other issues that needs to be addressed? Yes. In this case, you try to help that person. And the larger problem here is, or responsibility is to the entire system and the remaining 10 welders that you need to improve the system. So here, yes, here is an employee is operating outside of, it's a special cause outside of the system. And the question is here is not to penalize. Is the question is, how can we help employee number 6? What's the problem? Okay. What's the problem that needs attention? And Dr. Deming said, should we send everybody to an occult? That's that's an eye doctor. So should we have everybody's vision inspected so they can improve? Should we change the operational definition of what a defective is and what a weld is? So that's the focus is not only on the individual, how to improve one individual, but improve the entire system, and by its extension, improve everybody. All right. So I have summarized some of the ideas about this discussion really is not only related to system of profound knowledge, all four elements, but specifically to psychology. And Dr. Deming says the most important application of the principles of a statistical control of quality. That's the control, the whole um, uh, discipline, and one tool of that is control charts, which I just showed you. It says the most important application of the principles of a statistical control of quality, by which I mean knowledge about common cause and a special cause, is in the management of people. This is one of the most powerful statements I've read by Dr. Deming. It's not about, widgets. It's not about, we have to understand control charts and the concepts, but how do we apply it to the management of people? And that is essentially what it means, the distinction between common cause and a special cause, how to improve the system and by extension improve everyone in it, or how to improve a special cause is a person, an individual in need of a special help. And we go on to say, Peter and goes on to say, individual's performance cannot be judged separate from the system, just as we talked about here. You can't judge this person without judging the entire system that produces that output. Performance of the individual cannot be measured except possibly on a long-term basis. One possibility is to help each individual to have a control chart of their own performance and see how you can help them to improve. The performance of any component or a person within a system is to be judged in terms of their contribution to the aim of the system, not for its individual production or profit, not for any other competitive measures. The performance appraisal is based on the unconscious premise that all performance is a special cause attributed to individual. That's what I was just talking about in that control charts. When you focus on each individual and try to analyze them rather than the system, you're assuming that each individual is a special cause, good or bad or indifferent, rather than looking at the system and all the members of that system. So the other problems with current practices that contributes to the futility of this is really the performance appraisal that is practiced right now. Is it really reliable? Are there biases in there? So many errors can happen when you go through different types of rating error. Leniency error. Some managers they give generous rating. Severity error. I came out of a tough situation, so I'm going to be tough on everybody else. If I receive the severe rating, I'll probably give a severe rating to my subordinates. Central tendency. You don't want to shake the boat and you keep everybody, give an average number to everybody. You just cluster most people near the middle. Or you have a range. I want everybody to be within this range. Halo and horn errors, perception of strength or weakness. A person has high productivity, then gets high in analytical skills and communication. It inflates rating. Halo effect is poor job of filing papers, and then get negative rating in the other areas. So your poor performance in one area, you get poor performance in everything else. And recency error. What have you done for me lately? I mean, if I have had a good month of sales, then I'm always good. Get a great rating. So something recency error is something good or bad has happened recently that affects and biases the rater's view of that employee. So these are the errors that can be contributed to current practices, and they're real. They're very real. And there are other errors. Evaluate a self-image. If I want to look tough or kind or caring, I give a different rating. I may want to look good, and my employees and my people are doing great, and I want to look good, and I may give a good rating. Categorization and stereotypes is a natural tendency to perceive and identify people or things by categories. This person is type A, or good old boys group. Those people from that category. Stereotyping is when we allow our mind to instinctively assign patterns to groups of people. I know, just imagine what happens when you're rating somebody with an employee that has some tattoos. What goes through your mind? Or somebody who has long hair, or it has a streak colored hair, or wears a different type of clothing, all right, or some type of appearances they have. How is that biasing the rating? Gender, race, and age bias. Stereotypical beliefs about the categories of people distort what we see. These are really real, and it does happen. It is really real, and it does happen. So what do we do instead? So those are some of the problems with current practices, the errors, and I have to tell you, my own experience and my observations is really a very dehumanizing experience. I have seen people come out of performance appraisals office with their managers literally in tears and so demotivated, so literally destroyed personally. Here are the people with lots of responsibilities, families, active in their churches, active in their kids' softball teams, in the community, and they go in there for 15, 20 minutes and they come out a broken person. It's very dehumanizing, and it's very discouraging. So what do we do instead? And this is the area that Peter has spent a lot of time, and is probably the most effective way of dealing with this. They say, okay, whatever you're trying to achieve, or you assume you want to achieve from current practices in performance appraisal, let's take it apart. Let's debundle them. Debundling means taking apart all of the various separate service or perceived benefits that one assumes performance appraisal offers an organization. Take it apart. And there's a list of them, and I want to touch on a couple of them. If you wanted to find identifying and responding to outstanding performance, if you say, well, we want to identify outstanding performance, okay, there are statistical methods that you can do that, not just psychological sense. They say, oh, that person is very outstanding. It's excellent. Where outstanding and excellence has a statistical, in terms of control charts and understanding variation, has an operational definitions. Not just psychological sense, but the statistical sense. A special person or something outstanding means continuously operates or performed outside of the limits of variability. Yes, if somebody does that, they are outstanding on continuous basis. How can we use them to help others? How can we put them in another job, perhaps? Maybe they need maybe they have certain skills and talents that can be used to help others. So there is a statistical sense that we can use to identify as outstanding performance, outstandingly good or outstandingly bad. There is a way to do that. If you want to look at creating a basis for pay, there is no evidence. There is no evidence to support the belief that people work more productively when regards are tied to performance. That should be rewards are tied to performance. I've seen Peter say in sessions and meetings, it says pay is the east wall and performance is the west wall. You have to look at them like that. They're that far apart. There is no relationship, no connections between pay and performance, no matter how much we try to promote that. And the way to do that, if you wanna consider pay for performance, look at market rate, and there are more detailed information in the leader's handbook. Look at tenure or seniority, and look at profit sharing. Let everybody share in the prosperity of the company. And there are ways to do all of these things. That is judicious and helpful, and it's very systemic. Here are some other areas, and I have, in the interest of time, I didn't address those in detail, but you can read them, and it's very effective. You want to provide feedback to individual employees? Okay, there are ways to do that. Separate these from all this, the current practices. You want to help people to come up with career goals? Well, you can do that. Help them with training and education. You want to identify candidates for promotion? This is a practice that may take years to prepare and help people for promotions. Or in the times of challenges and difficulties, if you have to consider layoffs, and he has a long section on that, is if that is something you have to do, there are ways to do it humanely. You want to foster communication between employees and their supervisors, there is a way to do that. Now, if you wanted to create a paper trail that will serve as a defense against suits for wrongful dismissal or other perceived unfair treatment, there is a humane and better way to do that as is currently practiced. You want to meet certain regulatory requirement, you can do that. And motivating people. There are ways to do this, and there are ways to do it effectively, and there are ways to do it considering the system, the psychology, and understanding variation. Take all of these apart and address each one of them, debundle them, and address each one of them, which it helps people, and it helps the system, and it helps the organization. So, just to put all of those together in terms of our view of the people, relationships, and collaborations, and how we want to improve, Ackoff suggests think of the organization as a social system, a community, and employees are people in the community. And Scholtes says that perhaps the greatest challenge facing today's leaders is to learn to help people and understand and appreciate their interdependence. This is really, it's beautiful. Peter was a humanist legend, and he really believed in the goodness of people and how to help them do a better job and improve personally and professionally. We are socially interdependent because as humans, we need each other. No man is an island. We are systemically interdependent because that's how good work is done. So, so all the things that we say that we are trying to, achieve with current practices in system uh, in performance appraisal, it has the opposite effect. It really is demoralizing, is dehumanizing. It does not help people to improve. But there is an alternative. There is a way to do those things that the organizations intends to achieve, and then um, and help people and help the system and create joy in work. All right, so I'm going to stop here for a moment. And Peter is going to present the second half. I just want to share a fun story Peter told me. I don't know. I think he told me, or I don't know. I read it, but I think he told me he'd done a lot of good work with a lot of people. He worked with a big pharma company, and he says the head of the research and development said, "Peter, I have to do the performance appraisals every year with these people, some of my scientists." He says, "These people do Nobel Prize quality research and development. And I have to get at the end of the year, required at the end of the year, just write some kind of a performance appraisal. It's just nonsense." These people, scientists, they do quality, Nobel Prize quality research. He said, "Well, what do you do?" He said, "Well, at the end of the year, we go to a beer party." And we draw names. Which scientist is going to be this level wise, and everybody's happy with it. We come around the next year and we do the same thing. So that just talks about the futility of the performance appraisal. All right, so that's my part, and we have time for Dennis to share his part. And Dennis, would you like to go ahead and go? And you want me to share the?
Sure, if you would, share the top part of that document that I shared, and I'm grateful that you shared it with everybody.
Okay.
Um, and for all of you who have a copy of it, I urge you to use it as a job aid to think about this a little bit differently than you might have thought about performance appraisals in the past. I was motivated to create this job aid for my wife, who had an annual conversation with her management every year, usually around Christmas time. Why people think of this as an end of year punishment to drag people through, including the people who have to do the performance appraisals, is something that I got over towards the end of my career in a large telecom. And some of my peers and I, in the last time we did a performance appraisal process for our team, we decided at the conclusion of that horrific process that we had lots of experience giving people more money and pissing them off, is the phrase that we used. It was the result of the performance appraisal process that we really should not consider useful. You can't improve it. We can't measure the destruction that it causes because people have done it for years does not mean that it should be continued. I had the opportunity at Pratt & Whitney Rocketdyne several years ago while out at one of the end-to-end thinking seminars to walk by an open conference room with an easel on a display at the door. And the easel said, "Why continue trying to improve something that should just be abandoned?" And I thought about it as being very applicable to performance appraisals. And so what I did is I put this job aid together for my wife who was having that annual conversation with her management. And there's a key point of this that we'll get to in a minute that is what I consider the highlight when I heard her talk to a Harvard graduate who was the HR vice president of her company. And she described what Harvard Business Review said about performance appraisals. So I'll let you think about that for a moment, and we'll get to that quote that my wife shared, and that was the last performance appraisal she had. Last time she had a discussion about why don't you let us manipulate the rating of your employees, etc. So Dr. Deming has some quotes about performance appraisals. Many of them Fazel has already shared with us. And I truly believe I have seen the evidence that the prevailing system of management has destroyed the people in our organization. If you think about the work of scientists since Dr. Deming, since Peter Scholtes, since Herzberg, since McGregor, the evidence is generated by a very recent study um, by Daniel Pink, who said that people are motivated by autonomy, mastery, and purpose, not by money, not by extrinsic motivations, but by being paid enough to deal with their basic human needs for life. If they have an opportunity to have some dignity in their work, if they have a chance to have some autonomy, guidance, of course, is important for that autonomy. But this idea of autonomy, mastery, and purpose, I think, aligns greatly with what Dr. Deming and Peter Scholtes said. And Fazel, if you would ease down just a little bit further on this first page, there's a quote at the bottom of this first page that I think is useful in addition to those other quotes from Dr. Deming. And it comes from the Wall Street Journal. And for all the great capitalists in the world that we run into in our opportunities to improve the way the prevailing system works, the Wall Street Journal has said that annual reviews are a terrible way to evaluate employees. To maintain morale, stay connected to employees, and avoid attrition, managers should check in with their reports every week. Now, this particular quote jumped out at me as I kind of wrapped up some of my lifetime of research because I did a lot of interactions and discussions and dialogue with the people. In my role as a manager, I had to manage a system that was pretty complex, but I also had to lead the people who were part of that system. And it struck me that this was absolutely on target with my experience because I always, in the process of getting and giving feedback, ask people about the work that they did. We had an obligation in my first management job to have an opportunity to interact with and inspect the work or have a conversation with people or observe their work every person every day. And the discipline of having communications with people and asking them for how is the work going? What is it like to do this work? And what are the things that we could improve together is a way to begin to build respect and trust of the people that are in the same system as we are. So this Wall Street Journal quote really resonated with me, and I pursued then some other quotes that would be helpful to her. And if you would go down to the next quote at the top of the next page, comes from the Harvard Business Review. And the fun part here is I overheard the conversation one evening between this vice president and my wife. The Harvard Business Review quote changed the mind of the HR from the HR VP who said, I did not know that. Despite having graduated from Harvard, they apparently were unaware of the quote that's cited here: hated by bosses and subordinates alike, traditional performance appraisals have been abandoned by more than a third of US companies. So this turned the tide, and my wife has not had that discussion for the succeeding year. It's important also to recognize that human resources people, as Fazel identified earlier today, that they're really cling to what they have been subject to. And people who are thinking only of maintaining the status quo are likely to fall into that same trap. And I've had a conversation since then with somebody in human resources or HR and shared this quote with them. And they again said, oh my gosh, if a Harvard Business Review and the SHRM or SHRM says that it's arcane and it's failing and that employers struggle to create it, they also suffer from this process. And when they begin to learn a better way, they have an opportunity to make a change that's meaningful to their organization and the people in it. You'll see that in this document that I've included a quote from Peter Scholtes, a quote from Alfie Kohn, and I also cited a book by Tom Coates and Mary Jenkins. Tom has passed, but Mary is still around, the last I checked, and she's living and working in Florida. But they wrote a book together quite a few years ago called Abolishing Performance Appraisals and What to Do Instead. And it goes into some of the same guidance that Peter Scholtes offered. And of course, you can see the quotes that follow from Daniel Pink. It's important for us to recognize this idea about getting feedback on your performance only at an annual date. And sometimes it's not just the end of the year, but as I had the opportunity to supervise technical people, we did something similar on their service anniversary. So when they had 5 years or 6 years or 7 years on the job, they had a process of getting some feedback about a summary of their performance. But the summary was about all of those daily, week by week, year by year accumulations of what's the feedback that we got about the work that we did together. So Daniel Pink's quotes go beyond this to talk about how somebody that's a professional athlete, Rafael Nadal, how would he be better if he only got feedback once a year? He gets feedback from his coaches in his early days. He gets feedback from his performance throughout the season. And it's important for us to think about our organizations and the people in them require continual feedback. It needs to be two ways. And in fact, very recently, read a book by Marcus Buckingham, who talked about the lies that organizations tell you, the lies that people need feedback. He called it feedback lie number 5, as I recall. And Chris Chapman wrote an article that he shared on LinkedIn about it and on his platform. And the idea that Peter Scholtes has offered over the years to us through these books and through his practice has been that not only do people need feedback, but it's not a matter just to criticize people, it's to give people positive reinforcement about what's going on in the system that we both work in. And it's important for us to be cognizant that we just have different roles and that the system gets in the way of the work that good people want to do. Fazel, if you would advance to page 3. And I think there are some other quotes here, including Peter Block. And what I would recommend, if you would just go a little bit further down to that with deeper understanding part. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I just would like to share with you that this job aid is available for your continual thinking and as a guidance if you have to have those difficult discussions with people who are not easily persuaded that annual performance appraisals do more damage than good, I urge you to think about how we begin to teach people about the interaction between the systems and the variation in it. Dr. Deming, at early stages of his career, talked about systemic issues being 85%, and later he got up about 95%. And recently I read some quote from him that said 98% of the performance comes from the system, not from the special causes, and not certainly from the people who are working in it. One exception that you might take is, well, the executives of the organization are people too, and they create the system. So it's important for us to think about this. Performance of the system is what we ought to be managing. And that means that we need to think about the interaction between the system and the people who work in it. So this action with knowledge, I'll just ask you to think about this. And there is one more page here that I think continues to share some ideas and better methods that I urge you to experiment with. You've got my contact information, and I would be delighted if you've got some further experience that you can share. If my theories are wrong and you come up with other evidence, I would love to hear from you. So, having shared the document, Fazel has been gracious to give me a few minutes to just review this document with you, and is something I learned from Bill. What questions do you have for me?
Would anybody like to share what Dennis or I had to share, or your experience? And I know, Paul, you mentioned something before we started the meeting. And
I would just share first, Fazel and Dennis, thank you very much for walking me and walking us through information, which probably for most, if not all of us, is not new information, but is always helpful to remember and reflect back on the important part of this. In terms of my work, was very grateful and had the honor of not only interacting. I had Peter come down and do a session with an organization where I started my healthcare management career. But I also made a presentation, I remember, in Washington, D.C., where I was talking about performance appraisals, and Peter was doing one next door. And so he asked me what I was talking about. And he said, well, why don't you just stop? Mm-hmm. And had then actually a conversation with Tom Towens. Long story short, Tom was not able to come and do a presentation for a large group in Virginia, and that's how I got connected to Mary. And then had the pleasure of working with Mary and her colleague Howard Stand for a period of 10 years. And over the course of 3 different organizations, worked on just exactly what we talked about today, looking at in healthcare and probably other industries, that there are requirements associated with having, it's called performance appraisal or review or something. So you have to be mindful of that. And certainly in the work that I did, I was, but in working with Mary and Howard, we did debundle compensation from performance appraisal, also looked at the system of what was considered exceptional performance in the organization, as well as what was considered performance that was not meeting expectations on the low end, and put in different systems for those. Having said all that, and again, for those of you that have done similar work in organizations, I don't have to tell you, it's not for the faint of heart. and we all probably can share examples of things where we, had good intentions, but came away with some good learning. And I certainly have experiences with that, but I can also share that it was important work, never boring, and I was very, very happy to be working with individuals such as Mary, who I have just such a high regard for, as well as her colleague, Howard Stanton, both just exceptional. And I felt very, very grateful to be working with them. That's all.
Thank you, Paul.
Dennis and Fazel?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I've enjoyed looking at this material, and it raises in my mind, there were several points where I was making notes, but I don't know if the crux, the essential thing is almost caught between the east and west wall today. But the language, it's not, I would say abandoned, but I think if one thinks in terms of a cosmology, and I have planning books from graduate work up at Waterloo where the teacher was talking about the management of the environment or environmental management. Nature, climate change, I've been abstract at times, but I'd also be put in a mental hospital. And I was able to hear Deming over at St. Louis in one of his last years, but I found his questions when I asked about mental illness or treating the patient. If you think about the volatility of the pharma that goes in mental health now, the quickness at which people are put on the meds and the struggle within your own skin, your boundary, and the complexity of each of our lives, then how can one find the words to have the meetings with the uppermost management in organizations? Because it's one thing to think a corporation or a government, but I spent my time trying to even have a business, trying to work within the patients of mental health. And then also I worked in Watergate that night years ago and lived at one point growing up, I mean, maybe a block and a half from where the Clintons lived, but I have spent time trying to go back to Arkansas or in Kentucky to go see the elected people. And really, it's weird what begins to happen, because to have that conversation with words in a relaxed environment, when now with a cell phone, the speed of which we're connecting, it's more of a socio-technical system that people think they can get ahead, or maybe you can destroy people or even murder people. But to me, something is grossly out of kilter. And it's as if we need a tune-up in a global sense, but it's not just money for sure, but the structure has afforded improprieties. And it's not that I don't stay silent. It's trying to age out a little bit better, because just the time it takes now to be effective in communicating with your insurance, your health provider, where you live, people are very stressed out. And it's really, I would hope that the sort of work that people have done, in particular end-to-end, or the qualities improvement. I don't think it's singular. It takes a heck of a lot of courage and stamina and perseverance to try to realize a change where the lights come on in all employees. I don't think Deming, I mean, just watching it and been and to have heard him. And he even wrote back to me and responded to some letters. It was funny to get the letter where it was hand stamped, returned address, and to know him, read and study. It just takes a lot to find, I think, your own pace. But where do you wish to work, if you can, and not be considered a reject? Because that happens are a defect. That happens in eugenics. It's happened in our country, and there's just something people don't want to talk about or make whole. And to find legal or really a context to heal, it can happen. It's just who can do it collectively to where the we shows up. So I thank you much.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. You know, as busy as Dr. Deming was, you made a reference to letters. I sent him something just about, this was towards the end of his life. I sent him a letter about how Sears auto mechanics were under the pressure from the management, were overcharging people. And I made a point to one of his 14 points. A week later, I had a response from him. A week later. I mean, here is a 93-year-old man who's busy and he's on all these 4-day seminars and all of that. A week later, I had a letter from him, a response.
Well, it registers with us, I think, when people do respond. I wrote a letter once to Norman Cousins about energy. Really, I was intrigued with the thermodynamics, and Cousins would write back. And a lady who I taught with down in Helena, Arkansas, she said, "Bill, the really great ones always respond." And somehow you figure out your pace, but I'm exhausted at times. And when you really realize the ebb and flow of organizations, to stand back and try to understand how does a city or a regional economy work, because the light should be coming on instead of seeing institutions or organizations being destroyed at the rate they are being done. And I do speak up at times. It's also been learning how to hold my tongue.
Fazel and Dennis, as I was listening to Bill speak and then reflecting back on a conversation, I do have maybe two things. One, an experience that I had that I believe is still true in organizations as they approach performance appraisals, and then another observation that I don't. It's only anecdotal because obviously I haven't been doing the work that I was doing before for about 4 years. But the first is one of the, and you may have read this, and we talked about it briefly today, was to stop in and see and talk with your employees on a regular basis in order to get to know them better and get to know their family and the work that they do. And that is certainly support that 100%. In the work that I did, put in a system whereby obviously once a year feedback conversation was important, and then encouraged managers to have another conversation mid-year just to check in. And that was to be encouraged. It was not to be, it wasn't a have to do, it was a nice to do. And the pushback that I got from that was incredible. And that people said, well, I don't have time to do this. And so I think of some of the systems that are in place where they have encouraged, going from a once-a-year evaluation to, a quarterly evaluation as a breakthrough in the system. And I thought, that's crazy. Can't even get them to do one and get those done on time. The other is again, and it's probably similar to other organizations that you're familiar with, is that doing performance appraisals on pencil and paper, that doesn't happen anymore. So doing them electronically or having some mechanism for doing an electronic interaction with the employee and recording that, submitting that. There's many different companies that are touting that now. And certainly I had a challenge just in terms of talking with the software companies about what I was desiring to do in just having a feedback section, because that's not where the emphasis was. It was the numerical desire that wanted to tout. But the other I think today is, and I again have some anecdotal information, is that AI is making an impact. That directors feel like I can now get some coded statements or something to fill in for a tool, and therefore, again, as Fazel, as you mentioned, the conversation can be about 15 minutes, if that long, for the appraisal, and because AI has been the innovation. And of course, Dr. Deming talked about that, is to be careful about equipment or technology as being breakthrough. So anyway, just two additional thoughts, and I'll be quiet.
Yeah, so technology is not a panacea. So
Yeah.
there is an enormous amount of time is invested in carrying out performance appraisal. I had an MBA student whose job was that. It's amazing how much resources is invested into doing that, and with no effect whatsoever. So, all right. So we're getting close to leaving. I want to share a bittersweet moment with you. This is our last session. Peter was towards the end of it, so he was going back and forth in the hospitals a lot, and he and I still made lunches every week, and I had things for him to do to stay active, lecture my classes and some forums. He was a big fan of Monty Python series, and particularly I just have to show you this. So this is a bittersweet moment. That's Peter, and that's Peg Scholtes, his wife. So I got him, he and I were pretty close, so I didn't mind doing that. I got him this T-shirt from "I'm Not Dead Yet" episode in Monty Python, and he loved it. He wore it almost every single day. And here is a bittersweet moment. I took a picture of it, and Peg later told me how much fun he had with that. So I just wanted to share that with you. He had quite a full life. So
only a flesh wound.
uh
Only a flesh wound.
yeah. So anyway, it's been really a great pleasure to do this. Hopefully, we'll have other things to do. We'll talk more about Peter's and his contributions in the July forum, and share some of his ideas. And it's nice to remember him for the kind of work he did. So one thing Dr. Deming always said, if anybody asked him about performance appraisal, he said, "Ask Peter Scholtes." So he always deferred questions to him. So he had that much respect for him. So
now, let me say, Fazel, on behalf of the organizing team of the End-to-End Thinking Network forums and the board, I want to thank you for this series, for your interest in stepping up to this. And I'm not sure how it came about, but I know you and I talk regularly, and very quickly you said, "Hey, I can lead this study session on the Leader's Handbook." I thought, "Whoa!" So we can add that to Tim and his economic study session. And then you also said you'd like to do an 8-week session in, I guess, beginning of July on understanding variation. And so that's not been announced yet, but that will be announced soon. And then you got some other ideas. So I really appreciate the time it took to pull this all together, and for all of you for attending.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been really fun. And your experience. So your contribution. And thanks, Dennis, for helping out today.
Dennis, thank you very much.
I enjoyed reading your paper.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Sure. Okay.
Fazel and Dennis, yeah, thank you for today. And again, pleasure
Yeah.
to meet everyone. Bill, always good to see you.
Yeah.
But thank you. It's a great opportunity to learn and to share. Thank you.
Yeah, this has been fantastic and looking forward to meeting some of you in person at the forum in July.
Likewise, Ben. Likewise, Ben.
Yeah, see you. See you in July.
Later.
All right, so I'll get this downloaded and uploaded. It'll be on the YouTube channel by the end of the day.
Thanks, Bill. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Have a
both.
great vacation.
All right. Thank
You
you.
all.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.